So I'm sitting here waiting for more news about the new Dragon Age game, planning out this 3-part series where I'd cover the trilogy we've been sitting on for years at this point. And then boom, they drop an October release date. So rude, right? Bioware didn't even think to call me and ask about my upload schedule before setting a release date for Veilguard, as it's called now. So here we are with a different and more condensed Dragon Age video, because there was no way I was cramming all 3 videos into like 2 months. It's not possible, not for me. So ever since Dragon Age 2, the series has been a little divisive to just about everyone. Dragon Age Origins and its DLC were critically acclaimed for just about every aspect of the game, from the freedom in the story, to the characters, to the mechanics, and especially to the origin system. See, depending on your class and race, you get completely different beginnings. And on top of that, you just get very different story moments throughout the game, depending on who you are. And well, all of that is missing in Dragon Age 2. Yeah, it's just not there. And this trend continues of just being very divisive to the next game, Dragon Age Inquisition. And I mean, we can assume that maybe people will be, a little torn on Dragon Age Veilguard. Maybe it'll be universally loved, I don't know. So with that established, I'm here to say that Dragon Age has no black sheep, other than that weird auto battle mobile game, but I don't think anyone was really worried about that. I feel that each game in the series is so uniquely different from one another that while you can compare them to each other, they really should be judged on their own merit rather than, comparing it to the game that came before or after, when it comes to truly criticizing and praising the game. If you ask me, each game is just kind of amazing in its own right. So lend me your ear for however long this video is, and maybe you'll give the Dragon Age game you don't really like that much another shot before Veilguard. So let's start with... So, as I said earlier, just a second ago, no one really dislikes this game at all. Dragon Age Origins is kind of considered a perfect game. So for the shortest section of this video, Dragon Age Origins, I'm not gonna talk about how amazing it is, because no one's questioning that. I'm going to point out some of its problems, its lacking qualities, because it has some. Yeah, so I could go on and on and on about something like the companions and how amazing and iconic they are. And I'd be right to do so, because, well, they are, and everyone knows that, so that's why I'm not gonna talk about that, but I will, however, first off, defend Oghren. Oghren is a companion that you get during the Orzammar section of the game, and it wasn't until recently did I find out that there's, at the very least, a very loud, maybe not large, but certainly loud part of the fandom that can't stand his ass. Sure, he's gross, crude, unwashed, possibly drinks his own pee, divorced, and makes jokes like this.
So you can turn into animals, aye? Like cats and wolves?
When the desire strikes me.
Have you ever, went into winter?
But that's the point. You're supposed to fix Oghren. He's a very broken and sad man you're meant to make better. If you do his companion quests, he ends up a Grey Warden who is happily married. And he's a father, and he names his kid after you, the playable character, for changing his life for the better. And also, I assume he takes baths now. I guess some people just got rubbed the wrong way by his general existence, but when you have Spike Spiegel voicing your character, I just find it hard not to like the guy. Anyway, yeah, the game is amazing, everyone agrees it's amazing, so where does it falter? Well, first off, the armor. The game has some really stanky and boring armor that they really want you to wear. And it's gonna take you a while to find anything that's good looking, and if you don't like it, well then you're just kinda screwed. And even if, it's a good set of armor, it's just kinda boring, very background character-like. And basically, if you find an armor, all you're gonna do is end up just upgrading it to a higher metal version, which all that does is change its color. Sure, armor looking cool isn't exactly the most important thing in a story-driven experience like Origins, but you know what is? Story. So while walking around in your less than desirable looking armor, you'll find that the story is amazing. You're gonna want to keep playing it for hours and hours and hours until you get to Orzammar. Yeah, the Oghren section, the dwarf section. Now, when I first started playing Dragon Age Origins, I was hyped to get to the Orzammar section. I saved it for last just because I thought, hey, this is probably the best part. It wasn't. Sure, you get to meet Oghren, and for me, that's a good thing, but oh my god, everything else in this place is the worst thing ever. Here you are set on what feels like the longest section of the game, which takes place entirely underground and consists of running back and forth, talking to people before they send you into the Deep Roads forever. The Deep Roads are so large and and long, they get their own map. And I mean map like the map you use to traverse the game world. They get their own version of that. Here, you are sent to kill darkspawn hordes forever. Seriously, it's as bad as I'm telling you. It's like that one dwarven ruin in the main quest of Skyrim you go through if it were multiple hours longer and less interesting to look at. And I'm not just comparing them because, you know, dwarves and dwarves. It's just that they're like both underground and filled with very hostile creatures. Also, it feels like it's basically for nothing. Unless you really want to choose the mean option and make more golems, this was really for nothing other than getting the dwarves to join you. Albeit, I suppose Orzammar is safer that you slaughtered a bunch of darkspawn, but like, come on, they had a handle on that already and you didn't even make any golems. And now onto the most infamous section of the game, the Fade. If you choose the human origin, you've already been to the Fade by the time you get to it again. The Fade is this other realm of demons and magic and idea, but when you go to it in the beginning, it's not bad at all. It's the tutorial section. It'd be really shitty if it was terrible. So either you've been to it and expect it to be easy, or you haven't been to it and have no idea what you're in store for. This section of the game is so bad, not a single person defends it. I'm sure the Orzammar section of the game has its fans. Hell, there are good parts about it. At the very least, it's really creepy, so that's interesting. But no, the Fade has no fans. It's so universally hated that there's a mod you can download to skip it, which has almost 300,000 downloads. The Fade section is so needlessly confusing and tedious. It involves turning into different monsters to solve puzzles in a giant maze, then saving all of your companions at the same time. The only fun part is saving your companions, but to do that, well, you gotta get back in the giant maze. And finally, for Dragon Age Origins, I just think some of its DLCs aren't that great. Now, they're good, but Dragon Age Origins, it's kind of renowned for having an amazing set of DLCs. And well, when I got to playing them, they were just kind of overall pretty good, and some not pretty good. I'm treading on eggshells here if you can't tell. There's the most notable DLC, the massive expansion called Dragon Age Awakening, that most people end up talking about like it's its own game because it's really that big. And yeah, it's pretty good, it's really good, but when you compare it to the main game, it's just kinda lacking. Its companions are definitely bland in comparison to the main game's cast. Two of its most notable dudes are a mage and a spirit who is possessing a dead dude, and they're both way better in writing in the next game. And then there's fucking Oghren again. He's just here, now a Grey Warden. I mean, I like Oghren, but like, I didn't need him back again. It's good, but it's just when you start calling it like a second game, when you start listing it as if it's another entry in the series, well, it doesn't live up to the part that it's attached to, the main one, you know? And then it's smaller DLCs that you don't need to start a whole new campaign for are just okay. They're usually there just to add like a new weapon, a new armor, give you some blood magic, except for Shale, the DLC companion, because he's amazing and everybody loves Shale. The quest itself to get him is fine, but you know, he's worth it in the end. Maybe I'm just stupid because my favorite DLC in this is Witch Hunt, which is like 2 hours long. But yeah, that's really all I can say negative about the game. It's amazing. One of the best RPGs ever made and one of the greatest games ever made. I just had to say all that just to point out that it's not a perfect game. And trust me, the next two aren't either, but I love them as well. So speaking of, we have the first black sheep of the series. Now this game is as divisive as it gets. You either love this game or you hate it. Dragon Age 2 made massive changes from its predecessor, like taking place entirely within one massive city rather than an entire kingdom, and most infamously removing all that customization stuff people loved in the first game. No more different races, no more different origins. You have to be a human named Hawke, and you always have to start out as a refugee fleeing from the events of the previous game with your family. I think even to this day, a lot of people consider this the blackest of the black sheeps in the series. It's a lot easier to find people defending Dragon Age Inquisition than it is Dragon Age 2. I've said this before on my channel and I'll say it again, I'm always pulled towards the underdog of a series, whether that be a whole character or a whole game. So try not to be too shocked when I say this, but I love Dragon Age 2 and it's hands down my favorite Dragon Age game. Dragon Age 2 is more than the sum of its parts. On paper, it shouldn't be my favorite. I hate games that try to railroad your customizable playable character into one, you know, sort of slot. lot. And I won't lie, I barely consider RPGs without some form of character customization as RPGs. But in this instance, even though there is character customization, I leave it alone and I play as default Hawke. I don't know why. I'm fully aware that probably the sole reason is the Miracle of Sound Dragon Age 2 song paired with the music video that I used to watch as a kid. Okay, with that out of the way, let me highlight some of the best qualities of Dragon Age 2, and there are many, thank you very much. First off is the art style. I could gush about how this game looks all day, but I'll try to keep it brief. Unlike the first game with very basic and generic looking armor, weapons, and just the general feel to everything, not to insult it too much, I mean, it's still good. All that has been flipped on its head, and the first time you'll notice this is when you come face to face with Flemeth in the tutorial intro level. And goddamn, there has been some updates to her. See, this is what the weirdo witch goddess woman looked like last time, and this is what she's looked like this time. Yeah, big changes, and that's just how the entire game is. Everything is a lot sharper, some would say edgier now even. And yeah, they'd be right too. I mean, just look at the armor on the box art, the Hawke armor. It's like the designers sat down and tried to make the most 2000s badass fantasy armor they could muster, and goddamn, they did it. And also, it's meant for a mage because by default, Hawke is a mage. Mages are cool. Yeah, but gone are the simple staffs, generic armor, and downright ugly robes. And instead, we have armor like this, and staffs that look like that. And notably, the staffs have blades on the end of them, which is the coolest thing ever, and that's a fact. And we have Quanari that look like this now. Yeah, big upgrade from how they looked like in the last game, whatever outfit Sten was wearing. And oh yeah, some people have a problem with how the elves look in this game, and to them I say, do you hate uniqueness? In every other game, the elves are just humans with pointy ears. Meanwhile, most of the elves in Dragon Age 2 look like this. And yeah, admittedly, it's a little weird, except this whole forehead nose situation going on is how they're depicted in like all the 2D art for the series, so why Dragon Age 2 is the only one to actually commit to this, I'm unsure. But I gotta give it points for doing so. I really hate generic elves. I really hate people, normal dudes with pointy ears. You know, I mean, I'm an Elder Scrolls fan, of course I hate that. Everything just looks a lot cooler in this game, and there's also a lot more variation in character designs as well. Sure, the companions in the previous game were amazing, but aside from Morgan, they all wear generic armor and clothes. But in Dragon Age 2, each character wears a unique set of armor and clothes that really make them stand out from the background. Moving away from art direction, even though I could continue to talk about that forever, but for the sake of time, I won't. Let's talk about the companions from Dragon Age 2. And another one of the hot takes I have here are that this is my favorite set of companions in the series, the best set to start a continent-spanning civil war with. We've got Anders, the possessed mage, Isabella, the pirate captain, Meryl, the dainty elf who uses blood magic, Aveline, the stoic but lonely guard, Fenris, the depressed former slave, one of your siblings who is probably gonna end up just being your brother, and finally Varric, the dashing dwarf rogue, and the real star of Dragon Age 2, and just straight up the face of the series at this point. He's so good, he plays a central role in this game, the next game, many of the books and stories, and of course will play another central role in Veilguard. This gang has to be my favorite because their group dynamic is just completely different from the last one. Now, I love Origin's gang and their dynamic. See, theirs is that everyone, well, almost everyone, hates each other, but they all love you. For the most part, these guys cannot stand to be around each other. They just all really admire you.
I was looking at your nose.
And what is it about my nose that captivates you so?
I was just thinking that it looks exactly like your mother's.
I hate you so much.
What?
And that leads to, like, you know, fun comments and interesting dynamics between characters. But the Dragon Age 2 group just has a nice dynamic. And wait for it, could you possibly guess what it is? The shtick for this is that they're all just good friends with each other. Shocking, I know, right? Excluding your sibling who has to leave because the story demands it, so they're gone for a while. Everyone else in your group are just pals, and a lot of time passes in Dragon Age 2, years even. And the whole game takes place in just one city and its surrounding areas, so the dialogue, it fits accordingly. Their party banter is them talking about visiting each other's houses, going out for drinks later, reminiscing on the past, and talking about their dreams for the future. And it's all like real because you all do just live in this city together. You guys are just friends who fight people, basically.
Thank you very much for the help earlier, Varric.
You made it back to the alienage in one piece, then?
I don't know how I wound up in Darktown. There are just too many corners in Kirkwall.
Still got that ball of twine?
I left it at my house. Don't worry, I won't get lost while we're following Hawke.
Bring it next time, Daisy. Just in case.
You guys all really start out at the same level, ruffians and refugees, and you guys have to rise through the system together as the years pass on. And this isn't just party banter. You really see these guys actually hanging out with one another. There's multiple cutscenes where you arrive alone and these guys are just already wherever you are at the bar hanging out with one another when you get there. They're not just hanging out with each other because of you. It creates this vibe that they don't ever really match in the series again, and of course, the characters themselves are just good. Dragon Age 2 starts a trend in this series that they really love to do, where they make the most innocuous characters into returning characters. Meryl and Isabella are both very minor characters from Dragon Age Origins, Meryl being a character from only the elf origin, and Isabella being a rogue trainer who you can find in a brothel and have a four-way with. And now they're party members and main characters in the next game. And of course, there's Anders, who was from Origins as well, but he wasn't some random NPC. He was a companion in Awakening. He was that guy who I said was much better in the sequel. When I first played Dragon Age 2, you have no idea the excitement I felt when you have to track down a Grey Warden and you find out it's fucking Anders and he's back. His character in Awakening was good and probably was the highlight out of the group, but he's so much more in Dragon Age 2. In Awakening, he's this kind of sleazy, kind of charming dude who sleeps around with anything that moves, but by the time you find him in the second game, he's still kinda that guy, but it's more like a facade he's putting up for himself and others. He's a broken man now. He's quit the Grey Wardens. He's been willingly possessed by that spirit companion I mentioned from Awakening. It's not like he's in his head either. That's the initial idea they had, but no, he's accidentally like merged with Anders. He's one in the same being now, with Anders, you know, sitting in the front seat of the situation. So in effect, he lost that friend as well, even if he's still somewhere inside of him. On top of that, his boyfriend got magically lobotomized and he couldn't even save him. All around bad time for the guy, but that's where you come along to make things better. And everyone in the group has this kind of heavy shit with them. You guys gotta all help each other out. Varric's brother goes insane and you have to deal with that. Like I said, Fenris is a former slave. It's just all around like that. And on top of that, this game just has really good cameos from previous characters. It's peak. It's peak. Now on to the last part that I really love about this game. The combat. Oh my god, the combat is the best in the series, as of publishing this video at least. It's the perfect balance between Origins tactical but slow combat and Inquisition's fast but thoughtless combat. In this game, you'll still be pausing the combat to switch between your party members and plan out an attack, choosing which ones to bring you for specific missions and making sure you get the best perks for them, like in Origins. But now combat is much more fast-paced. You don't have to worry about companion placement, and on top of that, your companions won't just stand there without being told what to do. And thankfully, your basic attacks now do some actual real damage. Also, it just looks cooler. I mean, look at these animations. So I've been glazing this game for a hot minute, but it is in fact not perfect. It may be the most flawed game in the series, but I still love it. For starters, it's probably not a good thing that the game really wants you to play as this guy. They really want you to play as this guy from the trailer. On top of that, they really want you to play as a mage. And that's a problem because, well, it's supposed to be an RPG, but it becomes more so of a problem when the story is very clearly written around you being a mage. So if you don't play as a mage, the story is just going to be worse because so much of the tension in the city is meant to be driven by you, this rising hero, not only being a mage, but an apostate. And without that, I guess the tension is that you know apostate mages, I guess. They just really clearly want you to be a mage. Luckily for me, I love default Hawke and I'm always a mage, but I'm aware that this would annoy a lot of people. But hey, if that bugged you when you played it and you didn't like the game because of it, think of this game less like, you know, Dragon Age Origins and more like The Witcher. And who knows, maybe you'll have a good time. Now, besides that, this game's biggest weakness is the story. The story is odd. I really like it for how odd it ends up being because it's so unique, but it's really weird, especially in comparison to the rest of the series. In Dragon Age Origins, you have to save the world. In Dragon Age Inquisition, you have to save the world. And I assume you succeed in Dragon Age Veilguard and you save the world. In Dragon Age 2, you accidentally start a civil war between mages and Templars, and that only happens at the end of the game, and it was never the plan during the rest of the game. Like, you weren't picking a side in the rest of the game. No, this all happens at the end of the third act. The game is written oddly in terms of structures. The game is broken up into 3 acts. The whole story is recounted by Varric, who is being interrogated in the present by this woman who will become important later. As you can assume from the tone of my voice, if you've never played the game, this is not normal for Dragon Age. Also, as I implied a second ago, there's no overarching goal for you or your team. It's just goals for, like, arcs in the story, you know what I mean? You need a job, you need to go on an expedition, you need to stop the Qunari threat to the city, and then you need to pick a side between the mages of the Templars. None of these flow together or into one another. There really is no, like, story. It's written more like a TV show. These plot arcs that you do are very good and well written, but they don't culminate into anything. And a lot of the stuff that happens becomes way more important in the next game, you know what I mean? Red Lyrium, the war, Corypheus, everything in this game becomes just more important and more impactful in Inquisition. Like, this whole arc with the expedition, you find Red Lyrium, and it's very clearly written to be super important, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just like, wow, this Red Lyrium is really weird. The Red Lyrium doesn't really go anywhere else in the game. I mean, sure, the final boss uses it, I guess, in, like, her sword, but it's more like a Chekhov's gun situation rather than, you know, a plot. It really feels like there was more to this game in terms of story that was cut out sometime during development and was never properly repaired. Things start to get a little odd at the end of the second act. There's, like, an entire plot point where your mom is taken by a crazy dude who then turns her into, like, a Frankenstein's monster bride, and, you know, she then dies, and that just happened. And it doesn't tie into anything else in the game, but it's a part of the main story. Like, this isn't some side quest. It's really just, like, in the middle of things. And then the third act is just super, super short, and so much happens in such a short time. This may be 1/3 of the story, but it is not 1/3 of the playtime. You get what I mean? Still, the story ends up being so odd, it's charming as a result, but your opinion may vary. Finally, the last weaker aspect of this game is the DLCs. There's a lot less to talk about with these DLCs than I could have with Origins. I kind of poo-pooed on Origins DLC, but as I said, I meant in comparison to the main game. They're great, and man, they are substantial. If you take Awakening, and it's two very small but very clear sequels, Golem of Armagrag and Witch Hunt, and you put them together, you really do have an entire second game. And those aren't even all the DLCs, there's even more. Yeah, it's just that second secret separate game just wasn't as good as Origins. It's still great though. There's an entire playable backstory for Liliana. There's this whole what if scenario where you play as the bad guys. It's all just really good and very substantial. There's like a presence to these, so to speak. And yeah, Dragon Age 2 doesn't have all that. Yeah, we've got a bunch of weapon and armor DLCs, which some are bangers. I mean, look at this. This is peak. And then there's this, which is interesting. But obviously, armor and weapons aren't much to write home about now, are they? So that's why there's these two story DLCs, and they're something. The first one is Mark of the Assassin. It's really fun, it's a grand old time, and it allows you to hang out with your sibling before they return in Act 3. But it's not much. It's like a 3-hour romp that sends you home with a kiss and not much more. So yeah, really fun side quest, but it's not Dragon Age Awake. And then there's the Corypheus DLC. Now, spoilers, but Corypheus is the main bad guy of the next game, but you get to fight him here first. And it's an interesting side quest to be sure. It involves your father and dwarves and the Grey Wardens, but all of that is bogged down by Corypheus being the most unfair boss fight ever. Oh my god, I'd rather go toe-to-toe with pre-nerf consort Radahn than fight him again. See, the problem is, before you do these DLCs, you have to pick which companions you will bring with you, and you cannot switch them during the DLC. So if you pick the wrong set of companions to bring with you, the wrong combination, you are screwed. His boss fight is at the very end of the DLC, so you will spend like 2-3 hours going through this big dungeon, doing, you know, the DLC stuff, and then get met with basically an impossible task because you chose the wrong combination. So you're gonna have to do everything over again. And then finally, there is the companion DLC for Dragon Age 2. This is Sebastian Vale. He is your DLC companion, and he fucking sucks. He's a Nito Burrito character on his own, maybe. But oh my god, as a follow-up to Shale and as a member of your party, he's awful. He's this well-to-do religious archer and prince from another city-state. All of your party members and you are nobodies. Really, just like I said earlier, you guys are rising through the city, getting your own prestige all together. Meanwhile, Sebastian is a prince. He just doesn't mesh with the group at all. And he doesn't just not mesh because he's a prince. The rest of the cast are, how do I put this, silly individuals. Meanwhile, Sebastian is working for the church, and this does in fact reflect on the rest of his personality. Liliana in Origins is working for the church, so do future followers, and they do it far better. He just comes off as some agent of the Chantry, and it just doesn't work with the rest of you guys. Luckily, you can just avoid Sebastian altogether. It's a shame because his voice is really cool. I've said the pros and cons of Dragon Age 2. The game is weird and flawed, but it's also so fun and entertaining. I think it has some of the best writing in the series, hands down, and like I said, the black sheep of this series is still peak gaming. So that leads us with one more game to talk about before Veilguard comes out, and that is here we are. The game that remained the last Dragon Age game for years, because Dragon Age 4 was in development hell for years. This is the green Dragon Age, Dragon Age Inquisition. This game has a lot of defenders and fans, far more than Dragon Age 2. And I know this is because this was a lot of people's first Dragon Age games and they went back and played the other ones. Opinions were generally harsh at first, but now they've softened with time. So what's this game's strengths? Well, its biggest strength, in my opinion, is its story and the systems that are woven into it. You were in the wrong place in the wrong time, and you end up as a very contentious military and religious figure after Corypheus blew a hole in the sky and killed the Dragon Age Pope in doing it. You lead a semi-religious inquisition to save the world. It's an overall very tightly written story, especially in comparison to the last game. Not all the choices in the story you make and the timeline in which you make them are going to beat the very fluid story of Origins, but in terms of writing, it might just be the best. Because of your character and their position in the story, it allows for the most political intrigue in any of the games. In Dragon Age Origins, you are a member of an apolitical knights organization called the Grey Wardens that everyone must help to save the world, even if a certain faction would rather not. All you need to do is rid them of their current plight, and they have to help you. Your biggest political obstacle is getting rid of Loghain, who has framed the Grey Wardens for killing the king. Origins has a very political story, but there's an intrinsic cap on it when the Grey Wardens are these apolitical civil servants, basically. Dragon Age 2 was also filled with political intrigue, but its focus is very regional. Meanwhile, in Inquisition, you lead a faction that is new, has next to no standing, and needs to legitimize itself so it can save the world. You aren't some ragtag group that needs to save the world together. You are an army who needs to forge political ties, and oh boy, that's what you do. And that's what allows this game to have the most political intrigue out of all of them, and that's sort of Dragon Age's bread and butter. Unlike with the Grey Wardens, no one is contractually obligated to help you here. You need to change that. That's where the systems and the writings of this game come together, because you need to wheel and deal basically every faction in the series. You even get to decide the fate of the Mage Templar War that Hawke and Anders started in the previous game. You have to become allies with both Ferelden, the kingdom from the first game, and the until now unexplored kingdom of Orlais. And of course, these two kingdoms are not on good standing with one another. You have to get the church on board, you have to set up ties with the Qunari, or at very least prove that you're not a threat to them, and same goes with handling Tevinter, whose upper crust might be involved with Corypheus. You need to allocate funds, find experts, get benefactors from nobility, claim land under your protection, build and take over infrastructure for your faction, go on expeditions, and of course do the best and worst thing in the game, and it's only the worst because there's not enough of it: hold court. Seriously, this is the funniest part of the game, and the only issue with it is that there just isn't enough of it. Anyway, a story being a magic political thriller doesn't make it good on its own, but Dragon Age Inquisition weaves all these aspects together through its stories and missions, making it one of the most cohesive stories in the series. And of course, it's just very well written and entertaining while it does all of that. On top of that, this game is just a really good sequel to the last two. It unites lots of the cast from both games in one way or another, and the story really ties together threads from the previous game, like I said, with the Red Lyrium and the Corypheus stuff coming back as major players in this plot. And man, does this game have cameos. Yeah, it blows the previous game's cameos out of the water. For an entire section of the game, Hawke, the protagonist of the last game, just hangs around your castle and helps you. And my god, this is the best part of the game, because look at him, he's back! The GOAT! On top of that, this game's hub area, the home base, is just really, really cool. It starts off as this tiny snow village, but then, you know, you guys leave that to get to the real HQ, this big-ass castle. Skyhold is clearly evolution of the systems that you had in Dragon Age Awakening. Yeah, I didn't mention it earlier, but Dragon Age Awakening is kind kind of a weird proto Dragon Age Origins. Like, you do all the stuff you do with this place that you do in Awakening, just it's a lot more evolved and fleshed out in this game. And obviously this place is a very big upgrade from the camp in Dragon Age Origins and Hawke's mansion in Dragon Age 2. You can even customize this place. And also, you just get to see all your companions and advisors hang out. This next part is a bit harder to place. In the last part, I broke up the good and the bad aspects very evenly, very cleanly. In Dragon Age, it's not as easy. First off, we have the companions, and well, unlike the last two games, they're not all the craziest and best, but the game makes up for that for having advisors. See, you run a military organization, and you need people who know what they're doing, so you have these other separate figures who aren't your companions, but are still central characters. First off, we have Cassandra, who was in the last game. She was that woman who was working for the church, who had kidnapped and interrogated Varric for the entire game. We have Iron Bull, a fan favorite and Quinari spy / mercenary leader. Sarah, a little goofball archer who runs a weird Robin Hood-esque network. We have Varric again, who's just back at it and of course is the best, and now is a famed novelist. Solus, an elf mage who, spoilers, is actually an evil dickhead god, who's not a god but is one and is the main antagonist of Veilguard. Oops. We have Vivian, a mage political pundit basically, who thinks mages were better off under Templar rule. Dorian, a runaway high society Tevinter mage. Cole, a spirit who's trying to be more human. And Blackwall, a dude who, spoilers, is pretending to be a Grey Warden. We have other characters as well, our advisors. We have Liliana, back at it again. She had a cameo in the last game, but she's fully back in our spy master now. We have the new, but my favorite, Josephine, who acts as our representative in the political world and is the treasurer. Morrigan, who finally makes her return with, depending on what you did in the previous game, her son. She never is officially called your advisor, but she shows up like halfway through the game and she's basically your magic advisor. And finally, the most interesting, Cullen, your military advisor and former Templar. And I say most interesting because he's a returning character, but like the most random character the game could have pulled to make a more central role. Cullen appeared in both previous two games, but he has such a small role in both of them, and I encountered him both times, and I didn't even notice that it was him. He's a Templar in the Mage's Tower origin in Dragon Age Origins, and he's in a few quests in Dragon Age 2, and he doesn't do much in either. And they just wanted to make this dude a main character, you know, I love it. Most of these guys are good, great even, but some of them are just really lacking. Notably Vivian and Blackwall, and Sarah to a lesser extent. Blackwall is painfully uninteresting, and I never even got to the part where I found out he was a fake until I got to the DLC and was presented with this card and had to look up what happened. He's not even terrible, he's just so boring, and when you compare him to the most boring character in Origins, the most boring companion, Wynne, well, she's just a page turner when put against Blackwall. We have Vivian, who's fun and charming, but she's a lot like Sebastian from Dragon Age 2. In terms of, you really want me to pal around with this dickhead? Like I said, she's a fervent Templar loyalist, and that just really drags her character down. It's like, I do not want her to be around when she's like, oh no, it was better when we were locked in a tower for our entire lives. We're dangerous people. Like, okay, you might be dangerous, and I don't know about me, but she's pretty useful in combat and has a really good character design, unlike Blackwall, so she's not the worst. Then there's Sarah, who I actually like a lot, but she's just not that interesting. She feels like a side character who just doesn't go away, you know what I mean? It's like if Cullen randomly joined your party in Dragon Age 2, and not Cullen from this game, but Cullen from that game. She's fun, but also feels like weirdly out of place in terms of everyone else here being professionals and well-experienced individuals. And she's just like a professional prankster, I guess. She's fun though, it's just like, in comparison, what are you doing here? And oh my god, would you look at that timestamp. Okay, let's shorten this stuff down. There's Solus, who is interesting, but I hate him a lot, and I don't just hate him for what he's doing in Veilguard. No, I hated him before that. The writers even knew that people were probably going to hate him because you can punch him in the face. All the other companions are really great. Cassandra is in her best form, Iron Bull is great, and Varric is just amazing. And Dorian is really, really good, and I hope he comes back. Another problem with this game is its mission system, because dear god, everything you do requires power, which isn't really a problem at first. I mean, power isn't that hard to come by. This mission requires 2 power, just go out and do like one thing very quickly and you can get a power, and then you can go and do it. But it becomes a problem when the final mission requires something like 50 power and you've already sapped up almost all the other sources of power in the game. So yeah, please do not use this system again. It gets really annoying after a while. I'm asking you very nicely, Veilguard. Next up is the DLC, and well, this game actually has like the most DLC out of any of the games. The only problem is 90% of it is ass. Most of the DLC stuff is really small and weird stuff, and is just like worse versions of the armor and weapon DLCs from Dragon Age 2. And it's got a handful of missions which are not worth it at all. Final boss in the Darkspawn one is comically bad, and overall just very mid. And for the armor stuff, I'm not putting this on. This looks horrible. I didn't want to pay money for this. But then there's Trespasser, and this DLC is actually great. Better than Mark of the Assassin and Legacy by far. It takes place a year or so after you save the day, and it sets up Veilguard by having you confront the now openly evil Solus and all of that. But the real highlight is seeing all of your actions throughout the game coming together. Your companions get this "where are they now" ending, and you also get to decide the fate of the Inquisition here. I don't know about what you did in your game, but I love seeing Cole get a happy ending, finding love and becoming a real boy. Cassandra rebuilding and making the Seekers a better organization. Varric becoming the leader of Kirkwall, the city from the second game, and most importantly, Liliana becoming the Pope. I mean, it's just amazing. Liliana especially, because she's been there from the start. You get to see her go through all these different positions, and now she's finally at the top. Now to finally end this video, Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, and Dragon Age Inquisition all have their flaws. Some of them more than others, some of them weirder than others, but all of them are some of the best RPGs ever made. You will not find the kind of cohesive stories and your decisions mattering in any other series that you will find here. Their commitment to your decisions mattering from game to game is second to none, not even in their other series. Mass Effect. Do you see this kind of commitment? Now, it's not to dog on Mass Effect, but it's just another level here. And I can really hope that Veilguard is good. Please, if you do not like any of the entries in this series, I implore you to go back and try them again. Especially Dragon Age 2. Maybe listen to the Miracle of Sound song. It'll change your mind. And with that, I am done. I have no idea how I'm going to edit all of this. Dear God, look at that timeline. Thank you for watching, I guess. Follow my art social medias for art. Bye.